Mark Seward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak about all of the amendments put forward by the Lords, although I will go into more detail on Amendments 1, 2, 3 and 8. I'm pleased, very pleased, that this bill is making progress, and I very much look forward to seeing it on the statute books as soon as possible. We are one step closer to fulfilling another manifesto pledge. Now, I do want to welcome Amendments 4, 5, 6, 7 and 9 for the reasons that have already been set out. This will allow members of the other place who lose capacity to retire with the dignity that they deserve. It's clearly a sensitive and complex problem, and I congratulate the government for finding a solution that received unanimous cross-party support in the other place, and I hope that it will receive the same cross-party unanimous support in this place today. Now, I do want to turn to Amendments 1 and 8, which we've discussed at length already, which propose to stop hereditary peer by-elections and stop any vacancies from being filled, but would still allow current hereditary peers to stay in the Lords, allowing their numbers to grow smaller and smaller as they gradually begin to leave. Now, the amendment, if passed, will leave the current crop of hereditary peers in the second chamber for years and years and years, and in some cases, as we've heard, decades. The entire purpose of our legislation now is to remove them immediately because of the principle that underpins our decision to make this change. Of course.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. I count a great many hereditary peers among my friends, and I know that they do excellent jobs. Good. However, Britain stands alongside Lesotho as a complete anomaly in the 21st century in preserving legislative roles based on lineage. Serving in this House, as in other, is a privilege of the highest order. Would the honourable member agree with me that our legislators should be there not on the basis of merit, but rather than DNA?
Thank you. Thank you. I thank the member for her intervention. I congratulate her for having so many friends in the other place as well. And I couldn't agree with her more. It's almost like she's read my speech, hence why she made the timely intervention. Absolutely. Of course, yeah.
Member agrees that the hereditary principle is wrong and nobody should be in this Parliament by dint of DNA, then surely he's saying we should abolish the monarchy. The Crown is part of this Parliament and royal assent is part of the legislative process. So if you go by that principle, then you're basically, the honourable member is basically saying that the monarchy itself is no longer relevant. Is that what he's really saying?
I thank the member for his intervention, and all I'd say is long live the King. It does not affect what happens with our monarchy, what we do with our hereditary peers today. And as I was saying to the honourable member before he intervened, no one should serve in the other place and make our laws simply because of the family they were born into. No one. No one. Not them, not me, not my children, and not theirs either. That is a basic principle that I hope we can all get behind, by all means.
And his case is essentially that the only form of legitimacy in the exercise of power is democratic legitimacy. But that doesn't square, does it, with the exercise of power in all kinds of other ways? We don't elect our judges. Some countries do. We don't. We don't elect all kinds of people who exercise fundamental powers. So many kinds of legitimacy are not democratic legitimacy. And surely he would acknowledge that had the government come forward with a proposal which allowed the hereditary peerage to wither on the vine, I think it would be very hard for anyone in the House to disagree, given they had a manifesto commitment.
I thank the member for his intervention. The principle I'm talking about here applies specifically to the two chambers that make our laws, scrutinise our laws, submit amendments, and so on. And the idea that some people should be allowed a say in that process because of the family they were born into is alien to me. It should have been abolished years and years ago, and I'm glad that this government is finally taking the steps to remove that principle. Now, I am certain, and I'm certain we'll hear it today, that there are decent arguments that can be made that the contributions that hereditary peers make are very good ones, often with nuance and expertise that comes with dedicated service in the other place. I have no doubt we will hear that argument today. But the same is true of those who are appointed as life peers, of course, when political parties fulfil their responsibilities and choose appropriate people for the roles. Now, life peers will go on to make excellent contributions and scrutinise our laws carefully, using their relevant expertise and knowledge, because they're often selected because of their expertise and knowledge, and not in the cynical way that the Shadow Front Bench and others were suggesting earlier on. Now, even if they don't, it's a life appointment, not a blood one, that they can pass down to the next generation. So I think that the system of life peerages now is the better way to go. And if honourable members opposite genuinely believe that the hereditary peers who are going to lose their places because of this legislation today should still be in the other place, make sure that the Leader of the Opposition, whoever they are, submits their name forward to make them a life peer. So, of course.
Well, he makes the point extremely well, and I think people with a mind to compromise would like to go down that road. But does he recognise that the usual handful of allocations will not be enough on this one-off occasion to meet the requirement that he has so ably outlined?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. There's over 20 positions available already, and as time goes on, more will become available. And it will be up to the Leader of the Opposition to make that decision. Yes.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for allowing me to intervene. Would he agree with me that the Labour Party manifesto clearly said that we would abolish hereditary peers? And if we were not to do this, the people of this country would simply be bewildered.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and he's put the point extremely well indeed. I've had to deal with this on a number of issues, including introducing VAT on private schools, for instance, where members have come to this place, argued the point, and said we had no right to do it. And yet, in this case, it was in our manifesto. We have a moral obligation to pass this legislation today, and I hope that the members opposite will join us in the lobbies as we do so. He chunders from a sedentary position. I'd more than happily take his intervention if he wants to give one.
I believe that the Labour Party has a moral obligation to implement every part of its manifesto, and consequently, how does he feel about the bits it's already ditched?
The Labour Party does have a moral obligation to fulfil our manifesto pledges, and I am confident with our 5-year term, we will make great progress on everything we set out in that document. Now, I will leave the point there because I think I've essentially argued that this amendment does undermine the core purpose of the bill, and it's entirely inconsistent with our commitment to remove hereditary peers from the other place. I'll turn now to Amendment 2, which is an attempt to make sure that in future all Lords Ministers are paid a salary. Now, I know that this amendment is well-intentioned. I read Hansard from the other place during this debate, and I can see why people have submitted, why the Lords have submitted this particular amendment. But ministerial salaries are determined by the Ministerial and Other Salaries Act 1975, and I'd suggest that any proposals to change them be made to this Act and not included in this bill. That's because this bill is specific, narrow and focused, and if we want to have, Madam Deputy Speaker, that conversation, I think we need to allocate far more time to it and give it its own legislation, so I won't be supporting Amendment 2 today. Right, turning now to Amendment 3, which I had to do quite a bit of reading around to understand. I understand that Lord True, the Leader of the Opposition in Lords, wanted to clarify the power of the monarch to confer a life peerage that is granted without a right to a seat in the Lords. Now, the creation of a new form of life peerage without any kind of parliamentary responsibility is unnecessary, and I will take interventions because I'm happy to have this point clarified, because, quite simply, the King already has that power. He used it when he granted his brother, Prince Edward, the title of Duke of Edinburgh. So, therefore, it already exists, and the need for clarity is unnecessary. The Lord True also mentioned that this newly clarified power could be used to honour people without swelling the ranks of the Lords. However, as we've already heard through other interventions today, if we want to recognise special contributions to public life, we already have plenty of ways of doing that: knighthoods, damehoods, OBEs, CBs, and so on. So I would maintain that life peerages really should be reserved for those who actively participate in the work of the House of Lords. And I'd urge the House to disagree with Amendment 3 today. Now, speaking about Lords reform more broadly, because it has come up at different times during this debate, I was pleased also to read in Hansard that Baroness Smith has suggested that a select committee set up in the other place can be used to examine the mandatory retirement age and minimum participation requirements that I know many members in this House support. Well, the suggestion also included a time frame, set it up within 3 months of this bill getting royal assent, and then essentially report back next year so we can make real progress on these other commitments. I wholeheartedly endorse this approach, and I very much look forward to the outcome of this work.
Generous with giving way. I'm inclined to agree with them, actually, about this appointment of life peers that don't sit. I don't know what my front bench's view on that is, but I think he made a very compelling argument. But on this matter of retirements, very sensible to say if people don't attend, they shouldn't retain their right to. I mean, people get appointed as lords and never turn up. I think there's a good argument that there's a point at which you have to say they no longer have that entitlement. But on age, this is a very dicey business, given that we have legislation which prohibits discrimination on the basis of age.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I thank him for his intervention, and his point is well made, which is why I'll follow the work of that select committee very closely. We've already heard other names mentioned, people who are over the age of 80 who are still making great contributions, so I'll follow the work of the select committee closely before I make my final judgment on that one. But even more broadly than that still, even more broadly than the work that select committee is going to undertake, once this bill has become law, I am going to continue to advocate for a second chamber that is more representative of our nations and regions. My honourable friend, the member for Mid Derbyshire, who's no longer in his place, did make a good point about expertise and not wanting to lose the expertise in the other place by increasing the proportion of people from other regions. But I would just say Yorkshire and the Humber is home to 5.8 million people. The suggestion that you can't find experts within 5.8 million people isn't necessarily a good one. I'm not suggesting that he was saying that, but I do think that there is still space to increase representation from our nations and regions without diluting the expertise that we find in the other place. It's also worth mentioning, I don't think it's wrong for me to say that it's clearly easier to be a lord and serve in the other place if you already have a base in London than if you do not. The figures do bear that up. If you look at the Lord's own surveys, they show the breakdown of where each Lord comes from, and about a quarter come from London, about 20% from the South East, and only around 5% from Yorkshire and the Humber, despite my region being home to 9% of the population. I am rounding up there, so do forgive me for that. When it comes to Scotland, I think he chunders from a sedentary position. I think it's about 2 or 3%. I can't recall the actual figures, but I'll check that. But the point remains that we have to make it more representative of our nations and regions. Now, we could address this in a piecemeal way, in the same way that we have done with this hereditary issue over many decades. So we could, slowly introduce reform after reform. Who gets appointed? Where do they come from? What proportion has to come from Yorkshire? And so on. But I have to say, I am not a fan of that approach. I do think we should be as bold as possible, do the difficult work now, because we were elected to do the difficult work in this term, and set out an ambitious plan for the wholesale replacement of the other chamber. Ready to be made up of people from all of our nations and regions. A truly democratic body which draws on the same golden thread that should always exist between the people we serve in this place and those that should sit in a second elected chamber. But the honourable gentleman chunters that this is off topic, and I probably do agree with him because the bill doesn't cover this. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will draw my remarks to a close. The bill in front of us today will remove the archaic right to sit in Parliament because of the family you were born into. I find this very hard, a principle that's very hard to disagree with. It shows our determination to make our democracy stronger and more representative, and it should just be the start of our commitment to reform the other place and improve our ability to do what we were all sent here to do, and that is serve the public. Thank you.